Good afternoon. Word of welcome to everybody as we gather together today to continue with our reflection on Pope Francis's letter to the church called The Joy of the Gospel. We extend a word of welcome to all today. How many had a chance to read the first chapter? We looked at the introduction the last time and made some books available. They had those summaries. Did anybody get a chance to read the first chapter? Good, okay. Lots and lots of stuff. John Wood is going to help break open a lot of the good material that's there. But a couple of the things that Francis talks about in the first chapter is the need to be a missionary church. And in reading it, I couldn't help but reflect on some of the great gifts that were given to me as a result of my experience of being on foreign mission in Zimbabwe. And one of the things I recall is that we would never enter into a gathering without first greeting every single person in the gathering. You would go one by one, you'd go through this whole system of handshaking, and you would ask about how they are, how their parents are, how their children are, how their grandparents are, how everybody in the visit is. You would get this long exchange of what everybody's doing and how everybody's doing, and then just when you thought you were done, then they would ask you those same questions, and you would fill them in on how everybody in your family is doing. And remember, they lived in extended families, so sometimes they had multiple wives, which meant that there could be easily 30 or 40 people in a village. And so when somebody says, how's people in your village, that's a long story. Pope Francis reminds us that if we're going to be evangelizers, we have to meet people where they are. He says, not just that, he had this wonderful quote saying, priests need to smell like their sheep. But he said all evangelizers need to smell like the sheep. It means we need to get close enough to them to know how they're really doing. And so when we were having Mass, I couldn't, no matter what time I got there, when I got there, the first thing I had to do, I just couldn't come up and say, good morning, in the name of the Father. Then I had to go around and greet every single person and hear how everybody was doing. And if I was in the middle of Mass and somebody came in late, I'd stop right where I was, and everybody in the whole community would get a chance to visit with that person, find out how they're doing, all that exchange, and sometimes I would, oh my gosh, we'll never get through this, and they would look at me and say, and you're trying to teach us what it means to be the body of Christ? And you won't give us a chance to find out how our brothers and sisters really do, and why they were late? So I tell you, I learned an awful lot from them. So as we begin our celebration, before we send our kids out and all that to Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, I would invite you to please stand, if you would please. It wasn't just what happened in church, it happened in school too. The very first period of the class of the day was called assembly. And so all 200 or whatever children would gather outside, and then they would form two concentric circles, an inner circle and an outer circle, and they would go around and greet everybody before they started school. So it took like 45 minutes. It was the longest period of the school day. And we're not going to do that. But if you would just, at the tables that you're sitting, if you would just make sure that you go around in a circle and greet everybody at your table, and just share a name, because we got folks who are visitors here, we got folks from Tiffin who are here, we got folks from all our different 5 communities who are here. So if you would just take, we're going to give you 5 minutes to greet everybody who's sitting at your table. Begin now. we stand. So Sister Marcia and Rachel are going to lead us in our communion song. I think Sister Marcia. Thanks, Rachel.
All right, welcome back. And today we're going to start into the first chapter of the Joy of the Gospel. It's called The Church's Missionary Transformation, which is a nice theme for me. I love the idea of mission. So we're going to be talking about what is our mission in this talk of the Joy of the Gospel. I saw this quote this week from St. Teresa of Avila. It's called Christ has no body. It says, Christ has no body but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes with which he looks compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks to do good. Yours are the hands with which he blesses all the world. Yours are the hands, yours are the feet, yours are the eyes. You are his body. And I think it's appropriate that yesterday was the feast of St. Francis, and we know, when we look at St. Francis's life and see the quotes of St. Francis, we begin to see where and why Pope Francis took the name Francis. I was reading about St. Francis yesterday in my daily saint story, and he said this at the beginning. Francis of Assisi was a poor little man who astounded and inspired the church by taking the gospel literally, not in a narrow fundamentalist sense, but by actually following all that Jesus said and did joyfully, without limit and without a sense of self-importance. And so he emptied himself so Christ could fill him up and he could be Christ to the world. And you got to know that people probably looked at St. Francis a little weird, in those days, like this guy. But sooner or later they realized this is Jesus. This is the face of Jesus. And Francis really captured the imagination of the whole world, and still does, because he was able to show the gospel, the joy of the gospel, to everyone around him. And I've kind of got this image when I read this part of the missionary, being called to be missionaries. And I was reading, we've been going through the great adventure in PRE this year. We just went through Noah and building of the ark, and how God came to Noah and said, I want you to build an ark. And that ark was designed and built to save all of humanity. You know, that Noah could continue the race and that all of humanity would be saved by that ark. And then later on, Jesus also tells us to build. He says he's going to build. To Peter, he says, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And again, the church is like an ark. And what did God say to Francis? He said, build my church, rebuild my church. He's telling us always to build. But the church is not an inanimate object. The church is alive. It's a living, breathing object. You know, and it's always ever changing, always ever new. But that church is like that ark. And that ark is going somewhere. And it's bringing people on board. And as missionary disciples, we should want to bring people on board. We should see every human being as our brother, as our sister, as our son, as our daughter. You know, I don't know if you have children or grandchildren, but this is my little baby Mariah. And I just kind of picture this huge boat, this huge ark. We're going through these seas and these rough waters. And I picture my little girl thrown overboard, and she's out in that water. I'm going to go after her. I want to save that little girl. And that love I feel for my little girl, my little girls, my little boy, is absolutely nothing compared to the love that God has for us. And He calls all of us to see every person like that. Imagine if you loved every person like you loved your son or your daughter or your brother or your sister. You know, you would thirst for souls, as Jesus says from that cross. I thirst. He's going to go after them. He's going to go after the lost sheep. And that's what He's calling us to in this first chapter of the joy of the gospel. And so, as I read through this chapter, I kind of came up with 10 things that I think Pope Francis is trying to tell us to do. 10 things that the church has to be. Again, that living, breathing, moving object, that ark that's saving people, bringing people on board, that's going somewhere. The church has to be a missionary. A missionary. He said the church itself is a missionary disciple. It has a mission. Number 2, it has to be faithful to the gospel. It has to live truth and love. Number 3, it has to be merciful. God is a God of mercy. Number 4, it has to be attractive. We have to attract people to that truth. Number 5, it has to be a witness. We're going to talk about that, taking on the smell of the sheep. We have to be a witness. Number 6, it has to be flexible. It's ever-changing, ever new. It's like this little tree that grows over time from this seed. As the church grows, she learns, she expands, she's flexible, she changes, she grows over time. The truth stays the same, but the way that truth is presented has to be flexible. Number 7, it is joyful. It always presents the joy. We know where we're going. That's why the mission is so important. Number 8, it is open. We're going to talk about open doors. Those doors always have to be open. Number 9, it is patient. It is patient. It waits. It believes and it trusts in God. Number 10, it has to be the image of love. Pope Francis always says to lead with love. And so that church has to be the image of love to the world. So we're just going to go through this, and I'm going to use a lot of quotes today from the actual document because there's so many good things in there that he says. I want to use Pope Francis's actual words in this document. So number 1, a missionary. You know, and I love the idea of missionary, mission. You know, my book, Ordinary Lives, Extraordinary Mission. I'm firmly convinced we have to rediscover our mission. You know, if you don't know where you are going, you are lost. And the greatest tragedy, the greatest crisis we face is that identity crisis. We don't know who we are, or why we are here, or where we are going. Our goal, our destination is heaven, to be saints. We're all called to be saints. But you've heard that quote, that saying, life is a journey, not a destination. The destination is on the other side. We're trying to get to heaven. But there's a process of getting there. There's a mission. This is not a Carnival cruise ship. It's a Mayflower. We are pilgrims, not tourists. Tourists just wander around and they see what they see, and they look for entertainment and attraction, and they're just on vacation. But missionaries, they're going somewhere. That Mayflower is going to find a new world. It's going somewhere. We have to be pilgrims. We have to be alive in that mission and get people on board, because we know this ark leads to salvation. But there's that process of it. It's not just, the whole point is not just to be on the ark. The point is to be transformed. To be transformed, to go through that process. God could just save the world. He could just snap his fingers and make us all do whatever he wants us to do. If there's people drowning, he could save them. He could do that simply, really easy. He could take away your trials, he could take away your challenges, just at the snap of a finger. But if he did that, you wouldn't be a saint. You would be a robot. He doesn't want robots. He doesn't want robots. And it's not about what we're doing, it's about who we're becoming. And that mission is about becoming saints. And we do that by becoming disciples. So we're going to see this process of what it looks like to be a parish of missionary disciples. Missionary disciples. He said the church, well, first of all, what is the church not? The church is not like a private club that you can join. The church is not just a hobby or another subject in school, And it's not a business trying to please customers. The church is a family trying to build disciples. And there's a huge difference. A huge difference. So we have to know what our mission is. We have to know what the purpose of the church is. He said evangelization takes place in obedience to that missionary mandate of Jesus. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And he said again, it's not a business. Mere administration can no longer be enough. Throughout the world, let us be permanently in a state of mission. So we have to rediscover this idea of mission. We can't just show up and go through motions. As a parish, we have to be out there saving people. We have to be out there with the sheep. We have to be out there, because everybody has a place on the ship. Unlike that Ark of Noah, everybody has their place. And a lot of people don't understand that idea of purgatory. What is the church, what's the whole deal with this idea of purgatory? And I kind of use the image of like becoming a doctor. Somebody could have just offered me a free ride. All your schooling is paid for, and everything. Well, we're going to get you through the process. Here's a free ride. You don't have to pay anything. And it's like we've all gotten a free ride. Our salvation, it's a free gift. But if I don't show up to class, if I don't go through the process of becoming a doctor, then I'm never going to be a doctor. God's not going to just snap his fingers, because then he's taken away your free will. If you don't have the heart of love, if you don't have the joy of the gospel, if you don't have that discipleship, you're going to have to go through that sometime. And purgatory is not like, well, you failed the test, try again. It's more like, you didn't make the journey. We got to keep going. We got to be purified. All right, so we're a pilgrim people. We are going somewhere. Number two, it's faithful to the gospel. This is in St. Francis's little description. It said St. Francis's devotion and loyalty to the church were absolute and highly exemplary at a time when various movements of reform tended to break the church's unity. And so the church is going to be flexible. She's going to present the gospel in a lot of different ways. But she is always obedient. It's not like we're going off and starting our own ark and just abandoning this ark and starting something new. We are one church, one truth. He said we need to be realistic and not assume that our audience understands the full background to what we are saying, or is capable of relating what we are saying to the very heart of the gospel, which gives it its meaning and attractiveness and its beauty. He's talking about the reference to the media here. He says sometimes the media can actually take what you say out of context. Can you believe that? They actually would take what you said out of context. And people do this to the church all the time. They take what she says out of context. And we can't assume that people know the gospel. And sometimes those doctrines and those teachings, they can seem really foreign and really judgmental if you don't have them rooted in the love and the joy of the gospel. But we have to be faithful to those teachings of the church. The integrity of the gospel message must not be deformed. What is more, each truth is better understood when related to the harmonious totality of the Christian message. In this context, all of the truths are important and illumine one another. In other words, we can't just focus on one issue, we have to present the whole gospel. He said sometimes we can get out of balance. He said if you preach on temperance 10 times, but you only preach on social justice once or twice, then you're out of balance. These teachings all come together. All right? It's all one church, one truth, one gospel that has to be presented in full. And the image I kind of got with this, last time if you were here, I told you the story of my fishing trip over at Marvin's house with all my kids and how it was a disaster. My kids were just crazy, and Marvin was very patient with us and just very, very open and having us there and everything. But there's a little time there where he was trying to help Mariah put her life jacket on. And she just, was not having it. I'm not wearing this life jacket. And she went off running, Marvin could have just said, all right, fine, you don't have to wear a life jacket. But that would be changing the truth of the gospel. The life jacket's important, But it's not like he's going to walk around town all the time just preaching, everybody has to wear a life jacket. You have to wear a life jacket. The first message has to be, you are loved and you are cherished. We don't want you to get hurt, all right? That's the reason for the life jacket, right? So, because people complain or they want us to change the truth of the gospel, we can't change the truth of the gospel, but we can change the way we present it and attract people to that truth. And so we have to be faithful to that gospel at all times. Number 3, mercy. Mercy says, therefore we can move forward boldly, taking the initiative, go out to others, seek those who have fallen away, stand at the crossroads and welcome the outcast. Such a community has an endless desire to show mercy, the fruit of its own experience and the power of the Father's infinite mercy. Frequently, we act as arbitrators of grace rather than facilitators. But the church is not a toll house. It is the house of the Father, where there is a place for everyone, with all of their problems. Everyone needs to be touched by the comfort and attraction of God's saving love, which is mysteriously at work in each and every person, above and beyond their faults and failings. Sometimes it doesn't seem like people are even worth being saved, right? Just leave them out there. They deserve to drown. They got themselves into the mess, they can get themselves out of the mess. God is a God of love and a God of mercy. We don't ever give up on people. I was reading a saint story this week of a man who was a satanic priest. He was a satanic priest. He said black masses, and then he was converted. And he shared the joy of the gospel and rebuilt a whole city around the rosary, actually. And he was beatified not too long ago. He's on his way to become canonized, to become a saint. And if he can become a saint, we can all become saints. Right? There's always hope. There's always that transformation. There's always mercy. That's one of the things I loved about John Paul II. His love and devotion for divine mercy. Some people that were close to John Paul II said that on the day he was Polish, and Saint Faustina was also from Poland. And Saint Faustina was the seer who had these, Jesus appeared to her and gave her this message of divine mercy. And John Paul II said it was his mission as Pope to get this message to the world that God is a God of mercy. And he established this feast day of Divine Mercy Sunday. And they had this banquet afterwards, and he said, this is the greatest moment of my life. Greatest moment of my life, to be able to present this feast of Divine Mercy. Of course, you know that John Paul II actually died on the vigil of that feast. That he established Divine Mercy. That God is a God of love and a God of mercy. Number 4, it has to be attractive. He said, Christian morality is not a form of stoicism or self-denial or merely a practical philosophy or a catalog of sins and faults. Before all else, the gospel invites us to respond to the God of love who saves us, to see God in others, and to go forth from ourselves to seek the good of others. Under no circumstance can this invitation be obscured. All of the virtues are at the service of this response of love. If this invitation does not radiate forcibly and attractively, The edifice of the church's moral teachings risks becoming a house of cards, and this is our greatest risk. It would mean that it is not the gospel which is being preached, but certain doctrinal or moral points based on specific ideological options. The message will run the risk of losing its freshness, and I love this. It will cease to have the fragrance of the gospel. Cease to have. This is what I was talking about with the life jacket. Why do we have these teachings? Why do we have these moral teachings? It has to be founded in love. It has to be founded in that gospel freshness and that joy of the gospel. It has to attract people, not push them away. I used to train for marathons and out on all these country roads out here. And you get to know where the dogs are pretty quickly and where the mean dogs are. And they just start coming after you. And some of these dogs, they just, these watchdogs. I understand the whole thing about having a watchdog, but if you even come near their property, they dart at you, they bark, they growl. One of them bit me. I've never gone down that road ever again. And sometimes that's what people look at the church like. Don't even come near me, don't try to change anything, they just stay away. That's their perception. It has to be attractive, And it can go the other direction too. One of the posts was talking about that idea of a watchdog, and it doesn't do any good to have a watchdog if people come in and are robbing your house and it doesn't bark either. We protect the truth of the gospel, but we invite people and we attract people, and it has to attract them. Our Protestant brothers and sisters can give us some great lessons on this. Their attraction for people, their love for people, to bring them in. We need that attraction again. Number 5, a witness. The Word of God constantly shows us how God challenges those who believe in Him to go forth. An evangelizing community gets involved by word and deed in people's daily lives. It bridges distances. It is willing to abase itself if necessary. And it embraces human life, touching the suffering flesh of Christ and others. Get this. Evangelizers thus take on the smell of the sheep, and the sheep are willing to hear their voice. We need to remember that all religious teaching ultimately has to be reflected in the teacher's way of life, which awakens the assent of the heart by its nearness, love, and witness. This is how the church spread. The church spread in the beginning because people were being martyred. And as they were being martyred, they were praying for the people that were martyring them. That's a witness. The word martyr means witness. A witness to the faith. You can't just tell people about Jesus. You have to show them. You want to bring somebody to Jesus Christ, you better have a relationship with them first. You better have a friendship with them. They better trust you. You can just start preaching to somebody, they're just going to ignore you. But if it's your brother or your sister, they know you love them. They know you want what's best for them. They know that you're going to love them no matter what. They might actually start listening a little bit to what you're talking about. They might actually say, maybe there's something there. I know this person loves me. I know they want what's best for me. Because they know that you have the smell of the sheep. You're there for them in good times and in bad. You're not just standing up on a pedestal preaching at them. You're down there with them. You're living with them. And going through those trials with them. Our church is full of great witnesses, great martyrs. And the whole church has to be a witness to the whole world. You can't just talk about Jesus. We have to show people Jesus. Number 6, it's flexible. In other words, it's a living, breathing organism. It's like a river. It changes. It gets narrow. It gets wide. It has a fast current. It has a slow current. And you're out on that ark. There might be days of sunshine. There might be days of storms. And everything you need for salvation is on that ark. God gives us all the tools we need. Sometimes we might have to use them in different ways. Sometimes you might be on that ark and you might come to this sunny beach island and the sun's shining and people are just living it up, and you might have to use a different technique than if somebody's in the middle of a storm and they're drowning and they're saying, help! It's pretty easy to convince them to get on board. But when everything's beautiful and sunny, you got to use a different method. We got to be flexible in the way we preach. And it says, the parish is not an outdated institution, precisely because it possesses great flexibility. It can assume quite different contours depending on the openness and missionary creativity of the pastor and the community. Pastoral ministry and a missionary key seeks to abandon the complacent attitude, get this, we have always done it this way. Well, that doesn't really apply to us here, so we'll move on. Today's vast and rapid cultural changes demand that we constantly seek ways of expressing unchanging truths in a language which brings out their abiding newness. The deposit of faith is one thing. Remember, that doesn't change. But the way it is expressed is another. And that does, and it must change with the times. The way we reach out for people, the way we invite people to that one truth, that one faith. We have to be willing to be flexible. And if we cling to our buildings, if we cling to our mass times, if we cling to our customs and our traditions and our stained glass windows that have our names on them or whatever, those are beautiful things. But the mission of the church is not to just bring people into the church. It's to get them to heaven. We can't just close ourselves in on ourselves. We're one church. Paul can, talk to people about this. It's like, some of you say, I'm with Paul, and some of you say, I'm with Peter. You're with Christ. It's not like, you know what the word parish means? It means exile. Exile. This is not your home. You're going somewhere. A church has a mission. It's a mission. Not to be just ourselves and close ourselves in, but to reach the whole world. That's the purpose of a parish. If we forget that, we start clinging to things that are temporary and forgetting that we're created for something more. We have to be flexible. Number 7, we have to be joyful. This is the joy of the gospel. This is what it's all about, the gospel of joy, which enlivens the community of disciples as a missionary joy. Finally, an evangelizing community is filled with joy. It knows how to rejoice always. It celebrates every small victory, every step forward in the work of evangelization. Evangelization with joy becomes the beauty in the liturgy as part of our daily concern to spread goodness. The church evangelizes and is herself evangelized through the beauty of the liturgy, which is both a celebration of the task of evangelization and the source of her renewed self-giving. Remember where the joy comes from? This is why I think Eucharistic adoration is absolutely essential to the new evangelization. We receive that love and adoration, we receive that joy, and only being filled up with the joy can we pour it out to the world. We've got to go to that gospel and receive that joy ourselves before we can share that joy. And, you got that image of the ark, right? And people see that ark and everybody's on that boat and they're working, but they're scowling and they're complaining and this is terrible and they're not going to want to get on the boat, right? Yeah, the work is hard and yeah, it's challenging, but it's filled with joy. We're willing to lay ourselves down because we know where we're going. We know that joy of the gospel. And it has to be contagious. It has to spread. Number 8, it's open. I like this one because I've complained about this before. The church is called to be the house of the Father, with doors always open wide. One concrete sign of such openness is that our church doors should always be open, so that if someone, moved by the Spirit, comes there looking for God, he or she will not find a closed door. Everyone can share in some way in the life of the church. The church is open to everyone, but he's saying physically the door should be open. And I wish our doors were always open. I know that people might come in and they might steal something and they might break something, but fear of the enemy is a victory for the enemy. My hometown parish was never locked. And I tell you, I went in there all the time at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, coming home from those parties or coming home from a sports thing or just when I didn't know what to do with my life, and I just went up there and I sat in the darkness. I love the fact that the door was always open. I'm so sad that we have to lock our doors in fear of evil, And the same thing with the sacraments. The sacraments should not just be closed for simply any reason. And this is especially true for the sacrament, which is itself the door, baptism. I know Pope Francis has come down on some people who refuse baptism for certain reasons. Baptism especially. If somebody's seeking baptism, those doors need to be open. He even said that the sacraments are not a reward for the righteous. They're more of a medicine for the sick, for sinners, right? And so we have to be open in our churches. We have to want more people to come in, not close the doors and say, we have enough people, go find your own church, right? We have to be open. Number 9, we have to be patient. God's word is unpredictable in its power. The gospel speaks of a seed which, once sown, grows by itself, even as the farmer sleeps. The church has to accept this unruly freedom of the word, which accomplishes what it wills in ways that surpass our calculations and our ways of thinking. This is a tough one for me. I want results, and I want them now. I gave a survey to my PRE kids last year at the end of class. How do you feel about your faith? A, excited, B, bored, C, confused, or D, indifferent. 4 out of 17 were excited. And it broke my heart. I'm like, I'm a failure. I'm terrible at this. I quit, That's just how you feel. I'm just pride. I'm like, I want to win. And I want them to love God. Why can't I get them to do it? And he said, it's God that changes people. You got to plant the seed. And you may never even see that seed come to fruition, but you don't know what God can do. You don't know how the ripple effect works. And maybe you just did reach 4, but who knows what those 4 will do and how that will spread. You have to be obedient. Mother Teresa said, God calls us to be faithful, not to be obedient. We have to have patience. He says evangelizing community is always concerned with fruit because the Lord wants her to be fruitful. It cares for the grain, does not grow impatient at the weeds. Got to be patient. Often it is better simply to slow down, put aside our eagerness in order to see and listen to others. Stop rushing from one thing to another and remain with someone who has faltered along the way. At times we have to be like the father of the prodigal son, who always keeps his door open so that when the son returns, he can readily pass through it. It's a punch in the gut for me. Slow down. Stop rushing from one thing to another. Be patient. That's what I tell people all the time when I travel. The most common question I get is from parents in their 40s or 50s, and my children have left. What do I do? What do I do? Trust God for one. And be patient. Matthew Kelly said that time is the Catholic Church's best friend. All things in time. If we're patient, God is a good shepherd, and he's a sore loser. He's going to go after the sheep. He goes after lost sheep, and we have to trust him. Number 10, it has to be the image of love. What counts above all else is faith working through love. Whenever the need for the light in the life of risen Christ is greatest, the church will want to be there. An evangelizing community knows that the Lord has taken the initiative. He has loved us first, and therefore we can move forward, boldly taking the initiative. Go out to others, seek those who have fallen away, stand at the crossroads, and welcome the outcast. Remember, lead with love. I prefer, this is the best quote of the chapter, I prefer a church which is bruised and hurting and dirty because it has been on the streets, rather than a church which is unhealthy from being confined, from clinging to its own security. More than the fear of going astray, my hope is that we will be moved by the fear of remaining shut up within structures which give us a false sense of security, within rules which make us harsh judges, within habits which make us feel safe, while at our door people are starving. And Jesus does not tire of saying to us, give them something to eat. Give them something to eat. We like to feel safe. We like to feel comfortable. And there's that little place where we can be safe, where we don't take any chances, we don't take any risk. We can hide from the world, we can go along through the motions, and everything looks fine and good, and we like our little comfortable place. And it's a place where you can't lose, but you can't win. You can't let people down, but you can't become who you were created to be. And Pope Benedict, he said, the world promises you comfort, but you weren't made for comfort. You were made for greatness. You're disciples. We have a mission. We have to go out. We have to go out of our comfort zone. And just on the way here, I had some other story planned, but I heard this story just on the CD. It was in my car on the way here. Father Michael Schmitz was giving this talk on confirmation, I think. And he was talking about this little island town, Nantucket or something, and where the Humane Society came from, on this little island long ago. They used to have these little huts on the island, on the beaches, on the shores. And there's this group of volunteers. And when there was a storm that would arise, they would sit in these places day and night, and they'd watch the horizon just on the lookout for any ships that might be in distress. And when they'd see one, they'd sound the alarm. And they would go out on these little wooden boats, and they'd risk their lives to see if they could save those people in distress. That's where it came from, this Humane Society. And they had this motto. They said, you have to go out. You don't necessarily have to come back. You may not come back. You say, well, what if we go out? What if we fail? What if we let people down? What if I'm not good enough? What if I don't do it right? You have to go out. You have to go out. Remember, it's the process. God can save them like that. It's part of your journey to be a disciple. It's part of your journey to go out there. They replace those people over time with professionals, and they train, people to come in and they get paid to do this kind of stuff, and the volunteers just kind of quit and subsided. And that's kind of where we are. Somebody else gets paid to do that, right? It's not my job. And then it becomes a business. You know what businesses do? You know what employees do? They just go, they kind of show up and they want to collect a paycheck. And you lose the humanity of it, and we think it's somebody else's job. It's not my job. That's the priest's job. That's the teacher's job. That's the DRE's job. It's your job. It's your job. We're called to be missionary disciples. Pope Francis says, get out of the boat. Stop clinging to your old comfort zones. And go out and make a difference in the world. That's what you're made for. Because if you don't do that, I used to run track and cross country, and I hated running. I was so scared of running those races. And sometimes I would just think of these excuses of why not to run. I remember sitting in a track meet at the University of Finland. There's this one wall that's all windows. And I was literally finding ways, how am I going to get out of this race? And I'm like, well, maybe somebody would crash through that window and the whole place would fall down, and then I wouldn't have to run, and just drastic things like that. Maybe the power would go out, lightning. I'm always praying for lightning on the outdoor meets. I'm like, I just don't want to run. I just want to get out of it. I don't want to do it. But you find an excuse, and you get out of it, you won't be at peace. You won't be at peace. The pain of knowing I didn't even try, I didn't even give my best, it's not going to bring you peace. That's more suffering than if you actually go out there and you do the work. Even if it's hard, even if it costs you, even if you have to be a witness. Alright? So we're called to be missionary disciples, to make a difference. And so, just among your tables for a few minutes, a couple of questions. You don't have to talk about these if you don't want, but kind of this idea of missions and called to be disciples, just something you can discuss among yourselves. A couple of things. One, how does having a sense of mission change your everyday decision-making process? Handed out thousands and thousands of these bracelets with the idea of always having a mission on your mind. How would that change your life if every decision was based on your mission? Is this going to help me accomplish my mission? Number two, when the right moment arises in our relationship with others, Pope Francis is asking us to speak about how faith fills our lives with meaning. Give an example of a time when you did this in the past, or a time when you could have, but failed to do so. All right, so just some discussion starters among your groups there. We'll take just 5 or 10 minutes here and kind of share your ideas and see what you come up with. Okay. Hopefully that was helpful. Again, just discussion starters, just getting to talk about it and work with these things with each other. Last time I told you, we also want you to really start delving into the Gospels. You can't have the joy of the Gospel without the Gospel. So, we have these Ignite videos. They're very, very well done. So we're going to watch the Ignite video before we go, just 5 minutes. And it's just basically a way for you as a family to kind of get together and watch something that kind of helps you think about the upcoming gospel for Sunday, to get in there and think about it in a way that maybe you haven't thought about it. And again, they're very entertaining, very well done videos from a family here in the diocese, and I think you'll enjoy them. And then we will be dismissed, but just to let you know, we do have the little booklets are available. Suggested donation is $3 for those. Become a Saint wristbands are always free. And then there's also a sign up there for anybody that can maybe help with soup. We're really a little short on that, so if anybody can help with soup, that would be helpful. So just put your name and your email so I can read it and put that on there. And our next session is November 2nd. So we'll end with this video on this is next Sunday, based on next Sunday's gospel.
Jesus tells the story of the king who invites special guests to a lavish wedding feast for his son. This isn't just another wedding feast. It's the only and the ultimate wedding feast, with the purpose of sustaining their very lives. They were me. I grew up in a family that prayed together and went to Mass together. We spoke of God frequently. I was definitely
All right, so hopefully you'll take that challenge to start reading the gospel together as a